Caroline Levitt was ready. On live TV, she aimed a jab at Jasmine Crockett's education, thinking it would rattle her. But the response that followed stunned everyone. What happened next wasn't just a comeback. It was a bold declaration that shook the room and left the internet buzzing. In a world where words can tear down or build up, Jasmine Crockett chose to turn mockery into a triumph of truth. As Caroline delivered her sharp remark, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "You know, it's cute how some folks think being loud equals being smart," she set the stage for an attack she believed would bring Jasmine to her knees. The words were sharp, meant to sting, and the tone was designed to put her in her place. Caroline expected an emotional response, perhaps even to fluster Jasmine into a corner. But instead, Jasmine sat poised, her calm demeanor contrasting the tension Caroline had tried to provoke. It wasn't the words that struck hardest.
It was the smirk that followed.
A smile meant not only for the person sitting across from her, but for the cameras and the audience, and soon for the millions of people who had watched the clip shared online. The situation was live on national television. A Friday night special broadcast from a studio in Des Moines, Iowa. The topic? Education, race, and politics. These were three loaded topics that never mix without stirring controversy. The panel consisted of 5 guests, 1 moderator, and 2 women who represented polar opposite views in America's current political landscape. As Caroline's words floated in the air, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't blink or reach for the mic. She simply leaned back slightly in her chair, letting the silence fill the space between them. It was an intentional pause, a silent but powerful statement. She knew exactly what Caroline was doing, using coded language to reduce her to a stereotype. She had been through this before. The moderator, sensing the potential for escalation, shifted in his seat, attempting to move the conversation forward. But Jasmine wasn't about to let that comment slide. Moments like these don't just appear out of nowhere. They build over time. They come from history, from tension that has been simmering beneath the surface for years. They're born from smiles meant to hide cuts, from people who speak kindly to your face while trying to diminish you in subtle, coded ways. Caroline's remark was just the latest example of that, and Jasmine knew how to respond to it, without raising her voice, without screaming back. It wasn't just about Caroline's dig at her education. It was about everything it represented, the constant questioning of her worth, the assumption that someone like her didn't belong in rooms like this. It was about the systemic biases that people like Caroline, knowingly or unknowingly, continued to uphold. Caroline's comment wasn't just an attack on her resume. It was an attempt to diminish her ability to contribute meaningfully to the conversation, to reduce her to an image that Caroline and others like her could control. But Jasmine wasn't going to let that happen. "Actually, I didn't make it out," Jasmine said, her voice measured but firm. "I made it through. And that's a very different thing." There was a shift in the room. It wasn't dramatic at first, but it was enough for the audience to feel the change in energy. Caroline's smile faltered for just a moment. She hadn't expected this level of composure. This wasn't just a woman fighting back with anger. This was someone who had earned every inch of space she occupied. This was someone who had fought for everything she had, from her education to her position at that table. "I graduated magna cum laude from Prairie View A&M, Jasmine continued, her voice strong and steady. "Earned my law degree from the University of Houston. Passed the bar on my first try. I worked public defense cases in some of the most under-resourced courtrooms in Texas. I wasn't given anything. I fought for it." Her words weren't just an answer to Caroline's snide comment. They were a reminder to the room and to the millions of viewers watching that achievements aren't defined by where you come from or the name on your diploma. They're defined by the work you put in, the sacrifices you make, and the strength you show when others try to belittle you. If you think the name of a school defines the quality of someone's mind, you're not questioning education, Jasmine said, pausing just long enough to let the words sink in. You're questioning exposure. There was a beat of silence. Caroline didn't know how to respond. Her well-crafted lines weren't having the effect she had hoped for. Jasmine's calm delivery had stripped away the power of her words. The audience, already tense with the charged atmosphere of the evening, shifted. Some looked at their laps, unsure how to react, while others began to murmur in approval. The room had been rocked by the clarity of Jasmine's response. Jasmine wasn't done. She had more to say, and she was ready to make sure it was heard. "It's funny how folks underestimate you when they're afraid you might outwork them," she said, the words a sharp slice through the tension in the room. This time, the reaction from the audience was instantaneous. A ripple of gasps, followed by scattered applause. Slowly, more people joined in. It wasn't loud at first, but it grew. The moderator, flustered, quickly tried to regain control of the conversation, urging everyone to stay civil. But Jasmine didn't care about the applause. She wasn't here to win the crowd. She was here to speak the truth, unfiltered and unafraid. The conversation moved back to public education. Jasmine took her time before speaking, letting the moment settle. You can't compare a student who walked 3 miles to a school with no heat to one who got SAT prep built into their curriculum. It's not about pity. It's about acknowledgement. Her words cut through the rhetoric and the finger-pointing. She wasn't interested in deflecting blame or playing to one side. She was interested in creating real change. And that change, she knew, had to start with recognizing the disparities that shaped the educational system. When the conversation turned to the role of state governments in improving education, Jasmine didn't hesitate. The role of the state should be to level the field, not tip it further. But too often, the decisions are made by people who've never had to walk the road they're designing. Caroline, who had been waiting for an opening to jump in, raised her hand halfway, eager to defend her point of view. But Jasmine wasn't finished. "Respect doesn't belong to the loudest person in the room," she said, eyes locking with Caroline. "It belongs to the one who can stay rooted while being challenged." Jasmine had done what many people before her hadn't. She had stood in the face of adversity and claimed her place at the table without apology. And she had done it by staying true to herself, without resorting to theatrics or anger. It wasn't about winning a moment. It was about speaking truth in a way that couldn't be denied. By the end of the night, Caroline's words were little more than background noise. It was Jasmine's quiet strength, her unshakable composure, that people remembered. She hadn't just answered an insult. She had corrected the narrative. She had shown that people like her, despite what others might think, deserve to be heard, respected, and valued for who they are, not where they come from or what others perceive them to be. The applause that followed wasn't just for Jasmine's quick wit or her sharp words. It was for the message she had delivered. It was for the truth that resonated with so many people who had been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel small. Jasmine had spoken up for them. And in doing so, she had made her presence known. Backstage, as the show wrapped, Caroline made her exit, avoiding eye contact with Jasmine. But Jasmine wasn't looking for acknowledgement from her. She had already won. Not because of the applause or the viral moment. She had won because she had stood her ground. She had spoken her truth, and in doing so, she had shown everyone in that room and beyond what true strength looks like. In the days that followed, Jasmine was inundated with messages from people who felt moved by her words. Teachers, students, parents, people who had been told their whole lives that they didn't belong, that their experiences didn't matter, that their voices weren't important, now had someone to look to. Someone who had spoken the words they had always needed to hear. What Jasmine did that night wasn't just answer an insult. It was to reclaim the narrative. It was to show everyone that you don't have to shrink to be heard. You don't have to match someone's energy to prove a point. And you certainly don't need privilege to speak with authority. Sometimes, all you need is the courage to stand firm in your truth.